Can't sleep? Tired of counting sheep? Let the chilling yet soothing history of The Walking Dead lull you into a peaceful slumber. This narration will take you through every season and major character, guiding you through the post-apocalyptic world and into dreamland. In our restless world, sometimes the most unlikely stories become our greatest sources of comfort. Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey through one of television's most captivating narratives, The Walking Dead. This isn't about jump scares or heart-pounding action. Instead, we'll explore the deeper themes, character development, and meaningful moments that made this series a cultural phenomenon. As we settle into this extended exploration, allow your mind to wander through the carefully crafted world that Robert Kirkman first imagined in his comic series. The flickering candlelight of hope in humanity's darkest hour, the quiet moments between survivors, and the philosophical questions that emerge when civilization crumbles. These are the threads we'll follow together. The Walking Dead began not as a television series, but as a black and white comic book published by Image Comics in 2003. Robert Kirkman, a young writer with a passion for horror and human drama, envisioned something different from the typical zombie narrative, where most stories in this genre focused on the undead themselves. Kirkman was more interested in the living, how ordinary people adapt, survive, and maintain their humanity when the world ends. The comic's success grew slowly but steadily. Readers were drawn to its unflinching portrayal of survival, its complex character relationships, and its willingness to explore uncomfortable truths about human nature. Unlike many horror stories that relied on shock value, The Walking Dead found its strength in quiet character moments and moral ambiguity. When AMC acquired the television rights, they entrusted the adaptation to Frank Darabont, known for his work on The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. Darabont understood that the heart of the story wasn't about monsters. It was about people trying to remain human in an inhuman world. The pilot episode, which aired on October 31, introduced us to Rick Grimes, a small-town sheriff's deputy, who awakens from a coma to find the world transformed. This opening sequence, filmed in the abandoned streets of Atlanta, captured something profound about isolation and hope. Rick's journey from the hospital to the city streets wasn't just a physical one. It was a metaphor for humanity's journey into an uncertain future. In the early episodes, we witnessed the formation of the core group that would become central to the series. Each character brought their own skills, fears, and moral compass to the collective struggle for survival. Dale Horvath, the elderly mechanic with his RV and gentle wisdom, represented the old world's values of compassion and democracy. Shane Walsh, Rick's former partner, embodied the harsh pragmatism that many believed necessary for survival. The dynamics between these characters created a fascinating study in human behavior under extreme stress. Laurie Grimes found herself caught between two worlds, the life she thought she'd lost with Rick and the new reality she'd built with Shane. Her internal conflict reflected the broader theme of how people adapt when their fundamental assumptions about life are shattered. The early seasons took time to establish not just the rules of this zombie-filled world, but the emotional landscape of its inhabitants. The walkers, as they came to be known, were less important as individual threats than as a constant pressure that forced difficult decisions. When the group encountered other survivors, questions of trust, resource allocation, and moral boundaries became central to the narrative. At the CDC, Dr. Edwin Jenner provided both scientific context and philosophical weight to the apocalypse. His research into the nature of the infection raised questions about what makes us human. Is it our memories, our capacity for love, or something else entirely? His final choice to remain at the facility rather than face the uncertain world outside presented the first of many ethical dilemmas that would define the series. Herschel Green's farm represented something precious in the post-apocalyptic world, the illusion of normalcy. Here, surrounded by rolling fields and the rhythms of agricultural life, the group could almost pretend that the world hadn't ended. Herschel's belief that the walkers were simply sick people who might someday be cured reflected a desperate hope that the old world could be restored. The farm setting allowed for deeper character development and more intimate storytelling. Carl Grimes, Rick's young son, began his transformation from innocent child to hardened survivor. His accidental shooting created a crisis that revealed the group's vulnerabilities and dependency. The search for medical supplies and the difficult decisions about his treatment highlighted how every choice in this new world carried life or death consequences. Maggie Green's relationship with Glenn Rhee blossomed during this period, providing one of the series' most genuine love stories. Their connection represented hope, the possibility that new bonds could form even in the darkest circumstances. Glenn's evolution from a pizza delivery boy to a skilled scavenger and eventually a leader demonstrated how crisis can reveal hidden strengths and capability. The revelation of walkers in Herschel's barn forced the group to confront uncomfortable truths about their situation. Shane's violent solution to the problem created a rift that would define much of the season's tension. The destruction of the farm and the group's subsequent separation marked the end of their longest period of stability and safety. The discovery of the prison complex represented both opportunity and challenge. Here was a secure location with the infrastructure to support a larger community, but it came with its own dangers and moral complexities. The clearing of the prison and the establishment of their community became a metaphor for rebuilding civilization from the ground up. The introduction of new characters like Michonne, a katana-wielding survivor with her own mysterious past, added depth to the group's dynamic. Her initial distrust and gradual integration into the community reflected the challenges of maintaining human connections in a world where betrayal could mean death. The conflict with the governor and Woodbury introduced themes of leadership, power, and the corruption that can emerge when people are desperate for security. The governor's public face, as a benevolent leader, masked a ruthless dictator willing to sacrifice anyone for his vision of order. This duality raised questions about the nature of authority and the price of safety. Laurie's death during childbirth represented one of the series' most emotional moments, removing a character who had been central to the group's formation. Her final words to Carl about the need to be strong but not hard captured the essential tension between survival and humanity that defined the series. The destruction of the prison scattered the group across the Georgia countryside, beginning what many consider the series' most introspective period. The road episodes focused on smaller character groupings, allowing for more intimate storytelling and character development. Rick's journey with Carl during their time alone explored the father-son relationship under extreme circumstances. Carl's growing competence and emotional distance reflected the loss of innocence that war inevitably brings. Their encounters with other survivors, including the claims of sanctuary at Terminus, demonstrated how hope and desperation could lead people into dangerous situations. The reveal of Terminus as a cannibalistic trap represented a dark turn in the series' exploration of human nature. The survivors' escape and subsequent journey to Alexandria marked their transition from reactive victims to proactive agents of their own fate. The Alexandria safe zone represented the closest thing to pre-apocalypse normalcy that the group had encountered. Here were houses with running water, electricity, and the appearance of suburban life. The community's attempts to maintain social norms and democratic governance provided a stark contrast to the harsh realities the group had experienced. Rick's integration into Alexandria's leadership structure created tension between his pragmatic approach to survival and the community's desire to preserve their more civilized way of life. His relationship with Jessie Anderson and the domestic violence situation with her husband Pete raised questions about justice and intervention in a world where traditional law enforcement no longer existed. The wolf attack on Alexandria tested the community's defenses and revealed the limitations of their sheltered existence. The group's leadership during this crisis began their transformation from refugees to community leaders. The introduction of Negan and the Saviors marked a new phase in the series' exploration of power and resistance. Negan's charismatic brutality and the Saviors' systematic exploitation of other communities created a new type of threat, not just individual survival, but the survival of their way of life. The deaths of Abraham and Glenn in the Season 7 premiere represented the series' most controversial and emotionally devastating moments. These losses forced the group to confront the real cost of resistance and the weight of leadership decisions. The subsequent war between the Allied communities and the Saviors became an extended meditation on the nature of conflict and the price of freedom. Rick's transformation from reluctant leader to war commander reflected the series' ongoing exploration of how extreme circumstances change fundamental character. As the series progressed through its later seasons, themes of leadership, community building, and legacy became increasingly prominent. The introduction of new communities like the Kingdom and Oceanside expanded the world and provided new perspectives on survival and governance. Ezekiel's theatrical leadership style at the Kingdom demonstrated how symbols and storytelling could provide hope and unity. His relationship with Carol Pelletier, who had undergone her own dramatic transformation from abused housewife to fierce protector, showed how people could find new purposes and identities in the post-apocalyptic world. The Whisperers, led by Alpha, represented a different philosophical approach to survival, the complete abandonment of civilization in favor of a more primitive existence. Their conflict with the Allied communities raised questions about the value of progress and the price of maintaining human institutions. The series focused on the next generation of survivors, particularly Judith and R.J. Grimes, represented hope for the future. These children, born into or raised in the post-apocalyptic world, approached survival with different assumptions and capabilities than the adults who remembered the old world. The Commonwealth storyline explored themes of class, inequality, and the recreation of old-world power structures. The community's attempts to rebuild not just civilization, but specifically pre-apocalypse American society, raised questions about which aspects of the old world were worth preserving. Before the world ended, there was normalcy. Rick Grimes drove patrol cars down quiet Georgia highways, where the biggest concerns were speeding tickets and domestic disputes. Shane Walsh, his partner and best friend, shared coffee and conversation during long shifts, their biggest worry being whether to stop for donuts or gas station sandwiches. Lori Grimes packed lunches for her husband and son, navigating the familiar rhythms of suburban life. Carl Grimes worried about homework and playground politics, his world bounded by school schedules and weekend plans. These were ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that everything they took for granted was about to vanish forever. The outbreak began quietly, almost imperceptibly. News reports spoke of isolated incidents, strange illnesses, and unexplained violence. Most people dismissed these stories as sensationalism or foreign problems that couldn't possibly affect their peaceful community. The infrastructure of modern life, hospitals, police departments, government agencies, continued functioning normally, creating an illusion of stability even as the foundation began to crack. Rick's final patrol shift ended with a routine traffic stop that turned violent. The gunshot that put him in a coma was in many ways a mercy. It spared him from witnessing the initial chaos as society collapsed. While he lay unconscious, the world he knew ceased to exist, replaced by something unrecognizable and terrifying. During those crucial first days, Shane faced impossible choices. As Rick's partner and family friend, he felt responsible for protecting Lori and Carl. When the military cordoned off Atlanta and began bombing the city, Shane made the agonizing decision to leave Rick behind, believing his friend was already dead. This choice would haunt him and define his relationship with the Grimes family forever. Rick's awakening in the abandoned hospital remains one of television's most powerful introductions to apocalyptic horror. The silence was the first sign that something was wrong. Hospitals are never quiet, never empty. As he wandered the corridors, calling out for help that would never come, viewers experienced his growing confusion and terror. The hospital cafeteria, with its overturned tables and scattered meal trays, told the story of rapid evacuation. Bloodstains on the walls and floors suggested violence, but the absence of bodies created an eerie uncertainty. Rick's discovery of the chained cafeteria doors, with their ominous warning to stay away, marked his first encounter with the new reality's rule. His journey from the hospital to the streets of Atlanta was a pilgrimage through a dead world. Abandoned cars lined the highways, their doors open and contents scattered, as if their owners had simply vanished mid-journey. The bicycle he found became both transportation and symbol, a simple human-powered vehicle in a world where complex systems had failed. Rick's encounter with the little girl zombie in the park was a masterclass in subverted expectation. The child's torn teddy bear and shuffling gait initially suggested a survivor in need of help. Her transformation from apparent victim to mindless predator forced Rick to confront the most horrific aspect of this new world. The dead had returned, but they were no longer human. The horse Rick found represented both hope and tragic innocence. This beautiful creature, untouched by the apocalypse's horror, carried him toward Atlanta with noble grace. Its eventual fate in the city streets would become Rick's first lesson in the cost of hope in a world where kindness could be fatal. While Rick slept, the original group formed around survival instincts and chance encounters. The quarry camp outside Atlanta became their sanctuary, a place where they could pretend the world beyond their perimeter still made sense. The location was chosen for its defensible position and water source, but it became something more, a community bound by shared trauma and mutual dependence. Dale Horvath's RV served as both home and symbol of the group's nomadic existence. His gentle wisdom and mechanical skills made him invaluable, but his true contribution was philosophical. Dale represented the old world's values of democracy and compassion, insisting that survival without humanity was meaningless. His debates with other group members about moral choices provided the series' ethical framework. Andrea and Amy Harrison brought the bond of sisterhood to the group's dynamics. Their relationship represented the fierce loyalty that family ties could inspire, but also the vulnerability that came with loving someone in a world where loss was inevitable. Their different approaches to survival, Andrea's growing hardness and Amy's maintained optimism, reflected the spectrum of adaptation strategies. Glenn Rhee arrived at the camp with youth, agility, and street smarts that made him an ideal scavenger. His knowledge of Atlanta's layout and his ability to navigate the city's walker-infested streets made him invaluable to the group's survival. More importantly, his essential decency and humor provided moments of lightness in increasingly dark circumstances. The Dixon brothers, Daryl and Merle, brought a different element to the group dynamic. Their rough backgrounds and survivalist skills made them valuable members, but their abrasive personalities and prejudices created tension. Daryl's evolution from angry outsider to beloved family member would become one of the series' most compelling character arcs. The early days at the quarry camp established the routines and relationships that would define the group for years to come. Mornings began with watches and patrols, the constant vigilance necessary to detect approaching threats. Days were filled with scavenging runs, camp maintenance, and the endless tasks of survival without modern convenience. Carol Pelletier arrived at the camp as a victim of domestic abuse, her husband Ed's controlling behavior continuing even in their desperate circumstances. Her transformation from cowering wife to fierce protector represented one of the series' most dramatic character development. The apocalypse, paradoxically, became her liberation from a prison of fear and subjugation. The group's children, Carl Grimes and Sophia Pelletier, represented both hope and vulnerability. Their presence demanded that the adults maintain some semblance of normalcy and morality, but their safety required constant sacrifice from the group. The tension between protecting innocence and preparing children for a hostile world became a recurring theme. Laurie's relationship with Shane, during Rick's absence, created the group's first major internal conflict. Their romantic involvement wasn't just personal. It represented the way extreme circumstances could shatter normal social boundaries. Laurie's pregnancy added another layer of complexity, raising questions about bringing new life into a world that seemed determined to destroy it. The group's democratic decision-making process, championed by Dale, often conflicted with the need for quick action in dangerous situations. These debates about leadership and authority reflected broader questions about governance and social organization when traditional structures collapsed. The arrival of Jim, bitten and slowly dying, forced the group to confront their first major ethical dilemma. His slow transformation from human to walker played out over days, giving everyone time to consider what they owed the dying and what they owed the living. The decision to leave him behind, at his own request, established precedents that would guide future choices. The group's encounter with the nursing home survivors in Atlanta revealed the complexity of resource allocation in desperate times. These elderly residents, abandoned by their families and caregivers, had found their own way to survive. The moral questions raised by their situation, whether the strong had obligations to the weak, whether survival justified harsh choices, would echo throughout the series. Shane's growing pragmatism put him at odds with Rick's more idealistic approach to leadership. Their philosophical differences weren't just personal. They represented two different visions of what humanity could become in extreme circumstances. Shane argued for harsh realism, while Rick insisted on maintaining moral principles even at personal cost. The group's attempts to maintain normal social structures, including work assignments and shared meals, provided stability but also created new tension. Questions of fairness, contribution and leadership became sources of conflict as resources grew scarce and dangers increased. The death of Amy Harrison during the Walker attack on the camp marked the end of the group's illusion of safety. Her loss devastated Andrea and forced everyone to confront the reality that their temporary sanctuary was neither permanent nor secure. The attack also revealed the group's tactical vulnerabilities and the need for better defense. The destruction of the quarry camp forced the group onto the road, beginning their search for a new home. The CDC seemed to offer hope, a government facility with scientific resources and potential answers about the outbreak. Edwin Jenner's research provided the first scientific explanation for the Walker phenomenon, but his revelations raised more questions than they answered. Jenner's explanation of the infection's effects on the human brain was both fascinating and terrifying. The virus didn't reanimate the dead so much as it destroyed everything that made them human, leaving only the most basic brain functions intact. This scientific framework helped the group understand their enemies, but also forced them to confront the possibility that there might be no cure. The CDC's self-destruction sequence created the group's first major moral crisis as a unit. Jenner's decision to die rather than face the uncertain world outside represented one response to hopelessness, but the group's choice to leave, to continue fighting despite the odds, represented another. This moment established their fundamental commitment to survival and to each other. The revelation that everyone carried the virus, that death itself would trigger transformation, fundamentally changed the group's understanding of their situation. This knowledge meant that every member was potentially dangerous, that death from any cause could threaten the entire group. The psychological weight of this revelation would influence every future decision. Herschel Green's farm represented everything the group had lost: stability, community, and the rhythms of normal life. The farm's apparent isolation from the apocalypse's chaos allowed the group to imagine that perhaps some parts of the old world could be preserved. The barn full of walkers, however, revealed that even this sanctuary was built on dangerous illusions. Herschel's belief that the walkers were simply sick people who might someday be cured reflected the desperate hope that many survivors clung to. His refusal to kill them, his insistence on treating them as patients rather than monsters, represented one approach to maintaining humanity in inhuman circumstances. This philosophy would clash dramatically with the group's harder-earned pragmatism. Carl's shooting created a medical emergency that tested the group's resources and relationships. The search for medical supplies and the difficult decisions about his treatment highlighted how every choice in this new world carried life or death consequences. Herschel's veterinary skills became crucial to Carl's survival, demonstrating how expertise could be found in unexpected places. The developing relationship between Maggie Green and Glenn Rhee provided one of the series' most genuine love stories. Their connection proved that new bonds could form even in the darkest circumstances, that hope and affection could flourish despite constant danger. Glenn's evolution from inexperienced scavenger to confident survivor was accelerated by his desire to protect Maggie. Shane's growing instability during this period reflected the psychological cost of constant vigilance and moral compromise. His violent confrontation with Otis to secure medical supplies for Carl crossed a line from which there was no return. The lie he told about Otis's heroic sacrifice revealed how survival could corrupt even well-intentioned people. The discovery of walkers in Herschel's barn forced both groups to confront uncomfortable truths about their situation. For Herschel's family, it meant abandoning their hope that the infected might be cured. For Rick's group, it meant recognizing that their safe haven was built on dangerous delusion. Shane's violent solution to the barn problem, releasing and killing all the walkers, created a rift that would never heal. His actions were tactically sound, but morally devastating, destroying the trust that had developed between the two groups. The appearance of Sophia among the walkers added personal tragedy to the philosophical conflict. Sophia's death represented the loss of innocence for the entire group. Her transformation from lost child to mindless walker forced everyone to confront the reality that no one was safe, that hope could be a dangerous luxury. Carol's grief would transform her from victim to survivor, but the cost of that transformation was enormous. The revelation of Laurie's pregnancy added another layer of complexity to the group's dynamics. The question of the child's paternity created personal tension between Rick and Shane, but the broader implications were even more significant. Bringing a child into this world required resources, protection, and hope that the group wasn't sure they could provide. Rick's decision to tell the group about Jenna's revelation that they were all infected created a crisis of trust and leadership. Some members felt betrayed by his secrecy, while others understood his desire to protect them from devastating knowledge. This moment established the ongoing tension between protective leadership and democratic transfer. The destruction of the farm and the group's separation marked the end of their longest period of stability. The chaos of the escape, with walkers overrunning their defenses and fire consuming their sanctuary, forced split-second decisions that would haunt them for months. The highway where they had previously left supplies for Sophia became their emergency meeting point. Rick's leadership during this crisis was both decisive and controversial. His authoritarian declaration that the group was no longer a democracy reflected the harsh realities of their situation, but also marked a fundamental change in his character. The man who had once championed moral principles was learning to make pragmatic choices for survival. Laurie's car accident, while searching for Rick, represented the growing psychological toll of constant stress and uncertainty. Her willingness to risk her life and her unborn child's safety revealed the desperation that drove many of the group's increasingly dangerous decisions. The accident also demonstrated how quickly situations could deteriorate in their new world. The group's time scattered across the countryside allowed for more intimate character development. Daryl's emergence as a capable leader and tracker, Andrea's relationship with Michonne, and the growing tension between Rick and Shane all developed during this period of uncertainty and danger. The discovery of the prison complex represented both opportunity and ominous symbolism. Here was a secure location with the infrastructure to support a larger community, but it was also a place designed to contain dangerous people. The irony wasn't lost on the group. They were voluntarily entering a prison to find freedom. The process of clearing the prison and establishing their community became a metaphor for rebuilding civilization from the ground up. Each cleared cell block represented progress, but also revealed new danger. The prison's walker population had to be systematically eliminated, a task that required both courage and emotional detachment. The birth of Rick's daughter during this period provided a moment of pure joy. Amid constant danger, the child represented hope for the future, but also vulnerability that required protection. Laurie's death during childbirth removed a character who had been central to the group's emotional dynamics since the beginning. The arrival of other survivors, including the mysterious Michonne, expanded the group's capabilities, but also introduced new uncertainties. Each new member brought skills and knowledge, but also unknown loyalties and potential threats. The process of integration became increasingly complex as the group grew larger. The introduction of Woodbury and its leader, the governor, represented a different approach to post-apocalyptic survival, where Rick's group emphasized mobility and small-scale cooperation. Woodbury attempted to recreate the structures and comforts of the old world. The town's apparent success masked the authoritarian control and moral compromises that made it possible. The governor's public persona as a benevolent leader contrasted sharply with his private ruthlessness. His willingness to sacrifice anyone who threatened his vision of order revealed how easily the desire for security could justify terrible action. The heads in his apartment aquarium served as both trophies and warnings about the price of crossing him. Andrea's time in Woodbury provided a different perspective on the apocalypse's challenges. Her relationship with the governor demonstrated how charismatic leadership could seduce even intelligent people into accepting moral compromises. Her eventual recognition of his true nature came too late to prevent tragedy. The conflict between the prison and Woodbury represented competing visions of post-apocalyptic society. Rick's group emphasized individual freedom and democratic decision-making, while the governor's approach prioritized security and centralized control. Neither system was perfect, but the differences between them would prove irreconcilable. The escalating conflict between the two communities forced difficult decisions about violence and survival. Rick's group had to balance their moral principles against the practical necessity of defending themselves. The governor's superior resources and manpower made conventional warfare impossible, requiring guerrilla tactics and psychological warfare. The assault on the prison tested every relationship and alliance the group had built. Herschel's capture and the threat to his life forced Rick to confront the limits of his protective capabilities. The governor's willingness to use torture and intimidation revealed the depths of his moral corruption. Merle Dixon's defection from Woodbury and subsequent redemption arc provided one of the series' most complex character transformations. His final sacrifice to weaken the governor's forces demonstrated how even the most unlikely people could find nobility in desperate circumstances. His death affected Daryl profoundly, completing his integration into the group's emotional family. The destruction of Woodbury and the governor's escape marked the end of the group's longest period of stability. The Pyrrhic victory cost them their home and several beloved members, but it also demonstrated their capacity to survive even the most organized threats. The scattered survivors would have to rebuild once again, but they had proven their resilience. The aftermath of the prison's destruction forced the group to confront fundamental questions about their future. The separation into smaller groups allowed for more intimate storytelling, but also increased everyone's vulnerability. The road became both a literal journey and metaphorical search for meaning in a world that seemed determined to destroy everything they built. Rick's journey with Carl during their time alone explored the father-son relationship under extreme circumstances. Carl's growing competence and emotional distance reflected the loss of innocence that war inevitably brings. Their encounters with other survivors tested their capacity for trust and compassion. The various group configurations during this period revealed different aspects of each character's personality and capabilities. Daryl and Beth's unlikely partnership, Teresa's protection of the children, and Glenn and Maggie's determination to find each other all demonstrated the enduring power of human connection. The promise of sanctuary at Terminus provided hope, but also demonstrated how desperation could lead people into dangerous situations. The group's willingness to risk everything for the possibility of safety revealed both their need for community and their capacity for self-deception. The highway stretching out from Atlanta seemed endless in those early days, a ribbon of broken asphalt leading toward an uncertain future. The group that left the city bore little resemblance to the frightened refugees who had first huddled around Dale's RV. They had been tested by fire and loss, shaped by decisions that no one should ever have to make. Rick Grimes stood at the crossroads of leadership, his sheriff's instincts warring with the harsh realities of their new world. The badge that once represented law and order now felt like a relic from another lifetime. His transformation from small-town law enforcement to post-apocalyptic leader required abandoning many of the principles he had once held sacred. Shane Walsh's internal struggle intensified during these transitional days. His love for Laurie and Carl had become both his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness. The man who had once been Rick's trusted partner now found himself questioning every decision, every moment of compassion, wondering if kindness was a luxury they could no longer afford. Daryl Dixon emerged as an unexpected pillar of strength during this period. His tracking skills and fierce loyalty made him invaluable to the group's survival. But more importantly, his gradual acceptance of their makeshift family represented hope that even the most damaged souls could find redemption. His relationship with Carol began to evolve from mutual respect to something deeper and more profound. Carol Pelletier's transformation continued its remarkable trajectory. The woman who had once cowered before an abusive husband now stood ready to defend her chosen family with lethal precision. Her ability to compartmentalize trauma while maintaining her essential humanity became a survival skill that would prove crucial in the trials ahead. Herschel Green's farm appeared like a mirage in the desert of their desperate journey. Here, surrounded by rolling fields and the familiar rhythms of agricultural life, the group could almost pretend that the world hadn't fundamentally changed. The white farmhouse and red barn seemed to promise that some corners of the old world might yet survive intact. The farm represented more than shelter. It embodied hope. Herschel's insistence that the walkers were merely sick people who might someday be cured reflected a desperate desire to believe that normalcy could be restored. His veterinary skills, his knowledge of the land, and his unwavering faith provided stability for a group that had known little but chaos. Carl Grimes' shooting became a catalyst for profound change within the group. The frantic search for medical supplies, the desperate negotiations with strangers, and the agonizing wait to see if he would survive all served to highlight how precious and fragile their bonds had become. His recovery represented not just personal victory, but proof that their community could overcome even the most devastating challenges. Maggie Green's introduction brought new energy and perspective to the group. Her relationship with Glenn Rhee blossomed during this period, providing one of the series' most genuine love stories. Their connection proved that new bonds could form even in the darkest circumstances, that hope and affection could flourish despite constant danger. The farm's illusion of safety allowed for deeper character development and more nuanced relationships. Dale Horvath's philosophical discussions about maintaining humanity in inhuman circumstances became the group's moral compass. His gentle wisdom and unwavering belief in the possibility of redemption provided counterbalance to the growing cynicism that survival demanded. The discovery of walkers in Herschel's barn shattered the farm's peaceful illusion with devastating finality. The confrontation between hope and reality, between Herschel's compassionate delusions and the group's hard-earned pragmatism, created a crisis that would redefine their understanding of survival. Shane's violent solution to the barn problem revealed the extent of his psychological deterioration. His actions were tactically sound but morally devastating, destroying the trust that had developed between the two groups. The emergence of Sophia among the walkers transformed a philosophical disagreement into personal tragedy. Sophia's death represented the end of innocence for the entire group. Her transformation from lost child to mindless walker forced everyone to confront the reality that no one was safe, that hope could be a dangerous luxury. Carol's grief would fuel her transformation from victim to survivor, but the cost of that evolution was enormous. The revelation of Laurie's pregnancy added complexity to already strained relationships. The question of paternity created tension between Rick and Shane, but the broader implications were even more significant. Bringing a child into this world required resources, protection, and hope that the group wasn't certain they could provide. Rick's decision to reveal Jenna's secret, that they were all infected, created a crisis of trust and leadership. Some members felt betrayed by his secrecy, while others understood his desire to protect them from devastating knowledge. This moment established the ongoing tension between protective leadership and democratic transparency. The discovery of the prison complex represented both opportunity and ominous symbolism. Here was a secure location with the infrastructure to support a larger community, but it was also a place designed to contain dangerous people. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They were voluntarily entering a prison to find freedom. The process of clearing the prison became a metaphor for rebuilding civilization from the ground up. Each cleared cell block represented progress, but also revealed new danger. The systematic elimination of the walker population required both courage and emotional detachment that tested everyone's psychological limits. Rick's leadership evolved during this period from democratic consultation to benevolent authoritarianism. His declaration that the group was no longer a democracy reflected the harsh realities of their situation, but also marked a fundamental change in his character. The man who had once championed moral principles was learning to make pragmatic choices for survival. The birth of Judith during this period provided a moment of pure joy. Amid constant danger, the child represented hope for the future, but also vulnerability that required protection. Laurie's death during childbirth removed a character who had been central to the group's emotional dynamics since the beginning. The arrival of new survivors, including the mysterious Michonne, expanded the group's capabilities, but also introduced new uncertainty. Each new member brought skills and knowledge, but also unknown loyalties and potential threats. The process of integration became increasingly complex as the group grew large. The introduction of Woodbury and its charismatic leader represented a different approach to post-apocalyptic survival, where Rick's group emphasized mobility and small-scale cooperation. Woodbury attempted to recreate the structures and comforts of the old world. The town's apparent success masked the authoritarian control and moral compromises that made it possible. The governor's public persona as a benevolent leader contrasted sharply with his private ruthlessness. His willingness to sacrifice anyone who threatened his vision of order revealed how easily the desire for security could justify terrible actions. His collection of walker heads served as both trophies and warnings about the price of crossing it. Andrea's time in Woodbury provided a different perspective on the apocalypse's challenges. Her relationship with the governor demonstrated how charismatic leadership could seduce even intelligent people into accepting moral compromises. Her eventual recognition of his true nature came too late to prevent tragedy. Michonne's arrival brought new skills and perspectives to the group. Her katana and her walker companions created an air of mystery, but her fierce loyalty and combat expertise made her invaluable. Her gradual integration into the group's emotional family demonstrated the possibility of finding new connections even after devastating loss. The conflict between the prison and Woodbury represented competing visions of post-apocalyptic society. Rick's group emphasized individual freedom and democratic decision-making, while the governor's approach prioritized security and centralized control. Neither system was perfect, but the differences between them would prove irreconcilable. The escalating conflict between the two communities forced difficult decisions about violence and survival. Rick's group had to balance their moral principles against the practical necessity of defending themselves. The governor's superior resources and manpower made conventional warfare impossible, requiring guerrilla tactics and psychological warfare. The assault on the prison tested every relationship and alliance the group had built. Herschel's capture and the threat to his life forced Rick to confront the limits of his protective capabilities. The governor's willingness to use torture and intimidation revealed the depths of his moral corruption. Merle Dixon's defection from Woodbury and subsequent redemption arc provided one of the series' most complex character transformations. His final sacrifice to weaken the governor's forces demonstrated how even the most unlikely people could find nobility in desperate circumstances. His death affected Darryl profoundly, strengthening his bonds with the group. The destruction of Woodbury and the governor's escape marked the end of the group's longest period of stability. The Pyrrhic victory cost them their home and several beloved members, but it also demonstrated their capacity to survive even the most organized threats. The scattered survivors would have to rebuild once again, but they had proven their resilience. The aftermath of the prison's destruction forced the group to confront fundamental questions about their future. The separation into smaller groups allowed for more intimate storytelling, but also increased everyone's vulnerability. The road became both literal journey and metaphorical search for meaning in a world that seemed determined to destroy everything they built. Rick's journey with Carl during their time alone explored the father-son relationship under extreme circumstances. Carl's growing competence and emotional distance reflected the loss of innocence that war inevitably brings. Their encounters with other survivors tested their capacity for trust and compassion after repeated betrayals. Darryl and Beth's unlikely partnership during this period revealed new dimensions of both characters. Beth's optimism and musical talent provided emotional healing for Darryl's wounded spirit, while his protective instincts gave her the security to maintain hope. Their relationship transcended romance to become something deeper and more healing. Tyrese's protection of the children during the group's separation demonstrated the power of gentleness in a brutal world. His massive physical presence contrasted with his gentle soul, creating internal conflict about the necessity of violence. His relationship with Carol became complicated by her hidden actions and his moral principle. The various group configurations during this period revealed different aspects of each character's personality and capability. Glenn and Maggie's determination to find each other, Abraham's military leadership, and Eugene's claimed knowledge of a cure-all added new dynamics to the group's evolution. The promise of sanctuary at Terminus provided hope, but also demonstrated how desperation could lead people into dangerous situations. The group's willingness to risk everything for the possibility of safety revealed both their need for community and their capacity for self-deception. The journey to Terminus became a pilgrimage of sorts, with each character carrying their own hopes and fears about what they might find. The railroad tracks that led to the supposed sanctuary became symbols of both direction and constraint, guiding them toward an uncertain fate. The revelation of Terminus as a cannibalistic trap represented a dark turn in the series' exploration of human nature. The survivors' methods of escaping this horror demonstrated their evolution from reactive victims to proactive agents of their own fate. The experience left psychological scars that would influence their approach to future communities. The reunion of the separated group members at Terminus provided moments of pure joy amid the horror. These reunions reminded viewers why these relationships mattered, why the characters continued to fight for each other despite constant loss and betrayal. The journey from Terminus to Alexandria represented the group's final transformation from desperate survivors to a cohesive community capable of integrating with larger society. The challenges they faced along the way, weather, hunger, internal conflict, and external threats, tested every lesson they had learned about survival and cooperation. Gabriel Stokes's introduction as a priest who had abandoned his congregation provided new moral complexity. His cowardice contrasted sharply with the group's hard-earned courage, but his eventual integration demonstrated the possibility of redemption even for those who had failed their most fundamental obligation. The group's encounters with hostile survivors during this period revealed how much they had changed. Their tactical superiority and moral clarity in dealing with threats showed the evolution from frightened refugees to skilled survivors capable of protecting themselves and others. The approach to Alexandria was fraught with uncertainty and hope in equal measure. The group's previous experiences with promised sanctuaries had taught them caution, but their need for stability and community made them willing to risk disappointment once again. The Alexandria safe zone represented the closest thing to pre-apocalypse normalcy that the group had encountered. Here were houses with running water, electricity, and the appearance of suburban life. The community's attempts to maintain social norms and democratic governance provided a stark contrast to the harsh realities the group had experienced. Aaron's recruitment of the group demonstrated Alexandria's need for experienced survivors, but also highlighted the cultural gap between the sheltered community and the hardened travelers. His sincerity and openness provided hope that not all offers of sanctuary were traps. The group's integration into Alexandria's social structure created tension between their survival-focused mindset and the community's desire to preserve civilized behavior. Rick's struggle to adapt to domestic life while maintaining tactical awareness reflected the broader challenge of transitioning from survival mode to community building. The children of Alexandria, including Carl's interactions with other teenagers, provided glimpses of what normal adolescence might look like in a secure environment. These interactions highlighted how much the group's children had been forced to mature beyond their years. The group's attempts to integrate into Alexandria's existing social structures revealed both their growth and their limitations. Their survival skills made them valuable community members, but their hard-earned cynicism made them suspicious of Alexandria's apparent safety. Deanna Monroe's leadership style, emphasizing consultation and democratic process, contrasted sharply with the autocratic efficiency that crisis had demanded. Her background as a former congresswoman provided legitimacy but also highlighted the gap between political theory and survival reality. The group's individual adaptations to Alexandria varied dramatically. Some members embraced the return to domestic life, while others remained vigilant and suspicious. These different approaches created internal tension but also demonstrated the diverse ways people could respond to newfound security. The introduction of Alexandria's existing residents provided new relationships and conflict. The Andersons, the Monroes, and other families each brought their own perspectives on survival, community, and the price of safety. The group's presence in Alexandria gradually revealed the community's vulnerabilities and limitations. Their experience with external threats and internal conflicts provided valuable expertise, but also challenged Alexandria's preferred methods of handling problems. The domestic violence situation with Pete Anderson forced the group to confront questions about justice and intervention in a community that preferred to avoid confrontation. Rick's increasingly aggressive stance put him at odds with Alexandria's more peaceful approach to conflict resolution. The group's military efficiency and tactical thinking began to influence Alexandria's defensive preparations. Their knowledge of walker behavior, human threats, and survival strategies gradually reshaped the community's approach to security. The integration process revealed character growth in unexpected ways. Those who had been followers in the original group sometimes emerged as leaders in Alexandria, while established leaders had to adapt to new roles and responsibilities. The completion of the journey to Alexandria marked not just a physical destination, but a psychological transformation. The group that arrived at the safe zone bore little resemblance to the frightened survivors who had fled Atlanta years earlier. They had become a family forged by shared trauma, mutual sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. The Alexandria safe zone represented possibility, the chance to build something lasting, to create a community that could protect children and nurture growth. But it also represented vulnerability, the terrifying prospect of having something precious that could be lost. The group's influence on Alexandria began immediately, as their expertise and experience started to reshape the community's approach to survival. Their hard-earned wisdom about human nature, tactical thinking, and moral complexity would prove invaluable in the challenges ahead. The road to Alexandria had been long and costly, marked by devastating losses and difficult choices, but it had also been a journey of discovery, revealing reserves of strength, compassion, and resilience that none of them had known they possessed. The first glimpse of Alexandria through Aaron's photograph seemed almost too good to be true. Houses with manicured lawns, children playing in the streets, solar panels gleaming on rooftops. It was a vision of the world they had lost, preserved like a museum exhibit behind steel walls and watchful guards. Rick Grimes stood at those gates carrying the weight of every decision he had made, every life he had taken, every compromise he had accepted in the name of survival. The clean-shaven residents of Alexandria looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and concern, unable to fully comprehend the journey that had brought him to their doorstep. Deanna Monroe's interview process revealed the careful balance Alexandria had maintained between security and civilization. Her background as a former congresswoman provided political legitimacy, but her sheltered experience in the apocalypse left her unprepared for the harsh realities that Rick's group had faced. The tension between her democratic ideals and their survival pragmatism would define much of their early relationship. The group's individual reactions to Alexandria varied dramatically. Some members embraced the return to domestic life with relief and gratitude. Others remained vigilant and suspicious, unable to fully trust in the safety that walls provided. These different approaches created internal tension, but also demonstrated the diverse ways people could respond to newfound security. Carl Grimes's adaptation to Alexandria proved particularly complex. His relationship with other teenagers, especially Indid, highlighted how much he had been forced to mature beyond his years. The simple act of playing video games or attending social gatherings felt foreign to someone who had learned to measure time in moments between threats. The Alexandria safe zone had developed its own culture and social norms during its years of isolation. Residents held jobs, attended community meetings, and maintained the rhythms of suburban life. This carefully constructed normalcy provided psychological comfort, but also created dangerous blind spots about the realities of their world. Jessie Anderson's situation with her abusive husband Pete represented the ways that old-world problems persisted even in post-apocalyptic community. Her relationship with Rick became complicated by both personal attraction and the practical question of intervention. The domestic violence situation forced Alexandria to confront questions about justice and community standards that they had preferred to avoid. The group's integration into Alexandria's social structure created fascinating dynamics. Daryl Dixon's discomfort with dinner parties and small talk highlighted the gulf between their survival-focused mindset and the community's attempts to preserve civilized behavior. His eventual role as Alexandria's primary recruiter demonstrated how the community learned to value different types of expertise. Carol Pelletier's transformation into a suburban housewife persona represented one of the series' most brilliant character development. Her ability to blend into Alexandria's social fabric while maintaining her lethal capabilities created a perfect cover for gathering intelligence and protecting the group. The cookies and casseroles became weapons in their own right. Michonne's adaptation to Alexandria proved particularly significant. Her acceptance of the constable position and her relationship with Rick demonstrated the possibility of finding new purposes beyond mere survival. Her evolution from solitary warrior to community leader represented hope that even the most damaged individuals could find healing through connection. The wolf attack on Alexandria shattered the community's illusion of safety with sudden, brutal violence. These raiders, marked by their W scars and philosophy of taking everything, represented a different kind of threat than the group had previously encountered. Their nihilistic worldview and savage tactics forced Alexandria to confront the reality that their walls were only as strong as the people defending them. The attack tested every relationship and alliance within the community. Alexandria's residents, who had never faced organized human threats, found themselves dependent on the very people they had initially viewed with suspicion. The group's military efficiency and tactical thinking proved invaluable in repelling the assault, but the psychological impact lingered long after the immediate danger passed. Morgan Jones' return to the series brought new philosophical complexity to the group's approach to violence. His transformation from ruthless killer to pacifist monk created tension with Rick's more pragmatic worldview. Their debates about the necessity of killing, the possibility of redemption, and the price of mercy would echo throughout subsequent conflict. The wolf attack also revealed the community's vulnerabilities and internal divisions. Some residents blamed Rick's group for bringing danger to their doorstep, while others recognized that their previous safety had been built on ignorance rather than genuine security. These divisions would influence Alexandria's approach to future threats and internal governance. The massive walker herd that threatened Alexandria represented nature's own form of apocalyptic judgment. The sheer scale of the threat, thousands of walkers drawn by sound and movement, forced the community to confront the limits of their defenses and the fragility of their carefully constructed normalcy. Rick's plan to divert the herd demonstrated both his tactical brilliance and his willingness to take enormous risks for the community's survival. The operation required perfect coordination between multiple groups and absolute trust in each other's capability. The plan's initial success created a false sense of security that would be shattered by unexpected complications. The horn that drew the herd back to Alexandria came from the wolf attack, creating a devastating convergence of threats that tested every survival skill the group had developed. The community's response to this crisis revealed both their growth and their limitations, as residents who had never faced such dangers found themselves fighting for their lives. Glenn Rhee's apparent death during the herd crisis created one of the series' most emotionally devastating moments. His relationship with Maggie had become a symbol of hope and continuity, and his loss represented the constant threat that hung over every relationship in their world. The grief and uncertainty surrounding his fate highlighted the psychological toll of constant loss. The introduction of the Saviors represented a new level of organized threat that challenged everything the group had learned about survival and community. Unlike previous enemies who fought for resources or territory, the Saviors operated as a protection racket, demanding tribute in exchange for safety. Their systematic approach to domination revealed the dark evolution of post-apocalyptic society. The group's first encounters with Savior outposts demonstrated their tactical superiority and moral certainty. The decision to launch preemptive strikes against the Saviors represented a fundamental shift in their approach to threats, from reactive defense to proactive elimination. These attacks revealed both their capabilities and their willingness to embrace morally complex choices. Negan's introduction through his voice on the radio created an atmosphere of dread and anticipation that permeated the community. His reputation for brutal efficiency and psychological manipulation preceded him, forcing the group to confront the possibility that they had finally encountered an enemy they couldn't defeat through conventional means. The Saviors' systematic approach to breaking communities through violence and intimidation represented a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. Their methods weren't just about resources, they were about crushing the spirit of resistance and creating dependency relationships that would ensure long-term compliance. The capture of Rick's group and their forced submission to Negan represented one of the series' most psychologically devastating sequences. The lineup in the woods, with each character facing potential death, stripped away every advantage they had gained through skill, experience, and tactical thinking. They were reduced to helpless victims awaiting the whim of a charismatic monster. Negan's theatrical approach to violence served multiple purposes beyond intimidation. His lengthy speeches and dramatic pauses created psychological pressure that was almost as effective as physical torture. The waiting, the uncertainty, and the knowledge that death could come at any moment became weapons in their own right. Abraham Ford's defiant last words and Glenn Rhee's brutal death created a before and after moment in the series' emotional landscape. These losses weren't just tactical setbacks. They were spiritual wounds that would influence every subsequent decision the group made. The randomness of the selection process added an element of cosmic injustice that deepened the trauma. The group's reaction to these deaths revealed different coping mechanisms and breaking points. Some members retreated into themselves, while others channeled their grief into rage The diversity of responses demonstrated the complex ways that trauma affects individuals and community. The period of savior domination represented a dark chapter in Alexandria's history, as the community struggled to maintain its identity while submitting to external control. The regular tribute collections weren't just about resources, they were about psychological domination, reminding the community of their powerlessness and dependency. Rick's transformation into a compliant survivor shocked those who had come to depend on his leadership and defiance. His willingness to submit to Negan's authority represented a calculated strategy rather than genuine defeat, but the psychological cost of that submission was enormous. The man who had once declared himself the leader now found himself playing the role of the obedient servant. The savior's occupation of Alexandria revealed the community's vulnerabilities and unknown divisions. Some residents adapted to the new reality with resignation, while others chafed under the restrictions and tribute demand. These different approaches created tensions that the saviors exploited to maintain control. Daryl's captivity and torture represented the personal cost of resistance. His refusal to submit to Negan's authority made him a symbol of defiance, but also a target for increasingly brutal treatment. His eventual escape and return to the group provided hope that the savior's control wasn't absolute. The formation of the alliance between Alexandria, the hilltop, and the kingdom represented a turning point in the conflict with the savior. Each community brought different resources and capabilities to the alliance, but also different perspectives on leadership, sacrifice, and the price of freedom. Ezekiel's theatrical leadership style at the kingdom provided a fascinating contrast to Rick's more direct approach. His use of symbolism in performance to maintain morale and unity demonstrated alternative methods of leadership in post-apocalyptic communities. His relationship with Carol added personal stakes to the political alliance. The Hilltop's internal politics and leadership struggles revealed the complexity of community governance under pressure. Gregory's weakness and self-interest contrasted sharply with Maggie's emerging leadership quality. Her transformation from farm girl to community leader represented hope for the next generation of survivors. The Alliance's military planning revealed both their strengths and their limitations. Their combined forces could challenge the Savior's dominance, but the coordination required for effective resistance created new vulnerabilities. The need for absolute trust and communication across multiple communities tested every relationship and alliance. The war between the allied communities and the Saviors represented the series' most extended exploration of organized conflict in the post-apocalyptic world. The battles weren't just about territory or resources, they were about competing visions of how society should be organized and what values should guide community life. The Sanctuary's siege demonstrated the Alliance's tactical capabilities and moral complexity. The decision to use walkers as weapons crossed ethical lines that some members found difficult to accept. The debate over means and ends revealed fundamental disagreements about the price of victory and the nature of justice. The war's impact on non-combatants, particularly children, highlighted the civilian cost of organized conflict. The Alliance's efforts to minimize casualties while maintaining military pressure created strategic challenges and moral dilemmas that influenced every tactical decision. The Saviors' desperation as their position deteriorated led to increasingly brutal tactics, including the use of walker-contaminated weapons. These escalations demonstrated how conflict could spiral beyond anyone's control, consuming both sides in cycles of violence and retaliation. The war's conclusion and Negan's defeat represented both victory and tragedy for the Allied communities. The decision to spare Negan's life created divisions within the Alliance and raised questions about justice, mercy, and the possibility of redemption. Rick's choice to honor Carl's memory by breaking the cycle of violence was both heroic and controversial. The aftermath of the war revealed the long-term costs of organized conflict. The communities had suffered significant casualties, infrastructure damage, and psychological trauma that would take years to heal. The victory over the Saviors was real, but the price paid for that victory was enormous. The integration of former Saviors into the Allied communities created ongoing tensions and trust issues. Some residents couldn't forgive past atrocities, while others recognized the necessity of moving forward. These divisions would influence community politics and social dynamics for years to come. The establishment of the charter governing the Allied communities represented an attempt to create formal institutions that could prevent future conflict. The democratic principles and mutual aid agreements demonstrated the survivors' evolution from tribal groups to nascent nation-states. The introduction of the Whisperers represented a fundamental challenge to the community's assumptions about civilization and progress. Their philosophy of abandoning human society in favor of a more primitive existence raised questions about the value of the institutions and relationships the survivors had worked so hard to build. Alpha's leadership of the Whisperers demonstrated an alternative approach to post-apocalyptic survival that rejected community building in favor of individual adaptation. Her willingness to sacrifice her own daughter for the group's survival revealed the extreme lengths to which this philosophy could be taken. The Whisperers' use of walker herds as weapons represented a sophisticated understanding of the post-apocalyptic environment. Their ability to move among the dead undetected gave them tactical advantages that conventional military thinking couldn't easily counter. The community's response required new strategies and technology. The Fair Massacre at the Kingdom represented the Whisperers' most devastating attack on the Allied communities. The loss of so many leaders and citizens in a single event created a crisis of leadership and morale that threatened the entire alliance. The survivors' response to this tragedy would test everything they had learned about resilience and recovery. The introduction of the Commonwealth represented the series' most ambitious attempt to recreate pre-apocalyptic society. This massive community, with its complex class system, military organization, and economic structures, demonstrated what large-scale civilization might look like in the post-apocalyptic world. The Commonwealth's treatment of immigrants and lower-class citizens revealed the ways that old-world inequalities could be recreated in new circumstances. The community's prosperity was built on systematic exploitation and social control that many residents found preferable to the chaos of the outside world. The group's integration into Commonwealth society created both opportunities and challenges. Some members embraced the return to specialized roles and economic security, while others chafed under the restrictions and social hierarchies. These different adaptations created internal tensions and conflicting loyalty. The Commonwealth's eventual collapse demonstrated the fragility of even the most elaborate social constructions. The community's size and complexity made it vulnerable to internal conflicts and external pressures that smaller, more flexible communities could better survive. The series' focus on the next generation of survivors represented hope for the future and continuity of value. Children like Judith and R.J. Grimes, who had been born into or raised in the post-apocalyptic world, approached survival with different assumptions and capabilities than the adults who remembered the old world. The establishment of schools, trade relationships, and cultural institutions demonstrated the survivors' commitment to building something lasting. These achievements represented the evolution from survival-focused communities to genuine civilizations capable of growth and development. The ongoing challenges of leadership succession, resource management, and external threats revealed that the work of civilization building was never complete. Each generation would face new challenges and opportunities that would test their commitment to the values and institutions their predecessors had established. The series' exploration of memory, storytelling, and historical preservation highlighted the importance of maintaining cultural continuity across generations. The stories survivors told about their experiences would shape how future generations understood their heritage and responsibility. The Walking Dead didn't just appear overnight as a television sensation. Its roots trace back to Robert Kirkman's comic book series, which began in... Kirkman had a vision that was different from typical zombie stories. He wanted to explore what happened after the initial outbreak, when the immediate panic subsided, and people had to figure out how to live in this new reality. When AMC decided to adapt the comic for television, they took a bold risk. The network, known primarily for acclaimed dramas like Mad Men and Breaking Bad, was venturing into the horror genre for the first time. Frank Darabont, the acclaimed director behind The Shawshank Redemption, was brought on to develop the series, bringing his expertise in character-driven storytelling to the zombie apocalypse. The show's pilot episode, which aired on October 30, we met Rick Grimes, a small-town sheriff's deputy, who awakens from a coma to find the world completely transformed. The iconic scene of Rick riding a horse through the abandoned streets of Atlanta, surrounded by thousands of walkers, immediately established the show's scope and ambition. But what truly set The Walking Dead apart wasn't just the spectacular zombie makeup or the post-apocalyptic setting. It was the show's commitment to exploring human nature under extreme circumstances. From the very beginning, the series posed difficult questions. What would you do to survive? How far would you go to protect your family? And perhaps most importantly, what does it mean to remain human when humanity itself seems to be ending? The first season introduced us to a core group of survivors who would become like family to viewers over the years. Rick's wife Laurie and son Carl, his best friend and partner Shane Walsh, the tough-as-nails Daryl Dixon, the wise elder Dale Horvath, and the resourceful Glenn Rick. Each character brought their own perspective on survival and morality, creating a rich tapestry of human experience that would drive the series forward. As The Walking Dead progressed through its early seasons, one of its most compelling themes emerged: the human need for community. The series showed us repeatedly that survival wasn't just about avoiding walkers or finding food. It was about maintaining connections with other people and building something worth preserving. The farm owned by Herschel Green in Season 2 represented the first real attempt at creating a stable community. Here, the survivors could rest, heal, and momentarily forget about the horrors of the outside world. But the farm also revealed the tensions that arise when different groups with different values are forced to coexist. Herschel's initial belief that the walkers could be cured represented a kind of desperate hope, while Rick's group had already accepted the harsh reality of their new world. The fall of the farm was a pivotal moment in the series. It demonstrated that no place was truly safe, no matter how secure it might seem. But it also showed the resilience of the human spirit. When faced with overwhelming odds, the group didn't give up. They adapted, they survived, and they continued to care for each other. Season 3 introduced us to the prison, which became home for the group, and a symbol of their evolving understanding of survival. The prison represented both sanctuary and imprisonment, safety and confinement. Under Rick's leadership, the group learned to clear the facility, secure it, and make it livable. They planted crops, established routines, and created a functioning society within the prison wall. But the prison's storyline also introduced one of the series' most memorable antagonists, the governor. Philip Blake, as he was known before the outbreak, represented what could happen when leadership goes wrong, when the desire for control overwhelms compassion and reason. His community of Woodbury appeared prosperous and secure on the surface, but beneath that facade lay cruelty, manipulation, and a willingness to sacrifice others for personal gain. The conflict between the prison and Woodbury wasn't just about territory or resources. It was about fundamentally different visions of how society should function. Rick's group, despite their flaws and mistakes, maintained a commitment to protecting the innocent and making difficult decisions collectively. The governor's Woodbury was built on lies, fear, and the exploitation of the weak. The governor's assault on the prison forced another painful migration, scattering the group and leaving them to find each other again. This pattern of building community, losing it, and rebuilding became a central rhythm of the series. Each time the group lost their home, they learned something new about themselves and each other. The journey to Alexandria Safe Zone represented a major turning point in The Walking Dead's narrative. After years of constantly moving, constantly struggling, the group finally found a place that seemed too good to be true, and in many ways, it was. Alexandria represented not just physical safety, but the possibility of returning to something resembling normal life. The Alexandria storyline explored themes of adaptation and belonging. How do you integrate people who have been hardened by years of survival into a community that has remained relatively sheltered? The residents of Alexandria had built walls to keep the walkers out, but they had also built walls to keep reality out. They had maintained the rituals and structures of the old world, but they had lost much of its substance. Rick's group brought both strength and instability to Alexandria. Their survival skills and willingness to make hard decisions were exactly what the community needed to thrive in the long term. But their methods and their willingness to use violence, when necessary, created tension with Alexandria's more civilized residents. The character of Deanna Monroe, Alexandria's leader, represented the best intentions of the old world. She was educated, thoughtful, and genuinely committed to building a better future. But she was also unprepared for the brutal realities of their new world. Her son Spencer's eventual fate served as a reminder that good intentions and noble ideals weren't always enough to guarantee survival. The introduction of the Saviors and their leader Negan marked another major evolution in the series. Negan wasn't just another community leader. He was the head of a sophisticated network of communities built on intimidation, tribute, and carefully calculated violence. His organization represented a kind of feudal system, with the Saviors as the ruling class and other communities as their vassals. The famous lineup seen at the end of Season 6 and the beginning of Season 7 was perhaps the most intense moment in the series' history. The deaths of Abraham and Glenn weren't just shocking plot twists. They were a brutal reminder that no one was safe, that even beloved characters could be lost in an instant. These deaths also served to demonstrate Negan's power and his willingness to use extreme violence to maintain control. The war between Rick's coalition and the Saviors represented the largest scale conflict in the series' history. This wasn't just a battle between two groups. It was a war between different philosophies of leadership and community building. Rick's alliance with the Hilltop, the Kingdom, and other communities showed the power of cooperation and mutual aid. In contrast, Negan's network was built on fear and domination. The character of Ezekiel, the self-styled king of the kingdom, brought a unique perspective to the conflict. His theatrical persona and his pet tiger Shiva might have seemed absurd in another context, but they served an important purpose. Ezekiel understood that people needed hope and inspiration, not just survival. His kingdom was built on the idea that even in the darkest times, people could choose to create something beautiful and meaningful. The war also saw the evolution of several key characters. Carl Grimes, who had grown up in the apocalypse, began to articulate a vision of the future that went beyond mere survival. His letter to his father, revealed after his death, challenged Rick to think beyond the immediate conflict and consider what kind of world they were fighting to create. Maggie Green's transformation from a sheltered farm girl to a capable leader was one of the series' most compelling character arcs. Her leadership of the Hilltop demonstrated that the next generation of survivors had learned from the mistakes of their predecessor. She combined Rick's pragmatism with Herschel's compassion, creating a leadership style that was both effective and humane. The resolution of the war with Rick's decision to spare Negan's life was controversial among fans, but thematically important. It demonstrated that Rick had learned from Carl's vision of the future. The cycle of violence and revenge that had defined so much of the series could be broken, but only through a conscious choice to be better than their enemy. The post-war period of The Walking Dead was marked by both renewal and loss. The various communities began to work together more closely, sharing resources and knowledge. The construction of the bridge in Season 9 became a symbol of this cooperation, a literal connection between communities that had once been separated by mistrust and conflict. But this period also saw the departure of several key characters. Rick's apparent death in Season 9 was a seismic shift for the series. Andrew Lincoln's portrayal of Rick Grimes had been the emotional center of the show from its very beginning. His sacrifice to save the bridge and the other communities was entirely in character. Rick had always been willing to do whatever it took to protect his people. The introduction of the Whisperers as the next threat brought a new kind of horror to the series. These weren't just another group of human survivors. They were people who had chosen to live among the dead, to abandon their humanity in favor of a more primal existence. Alpha, the Whisperers' leader, represented a kind of nihilistic philosophy that rejected the very idea of civilization. The Whisperers' practice of wearing walker skins and moving among the herds was both terrifying and symbolic. They had chosen to become something less than human in order to survive, while the main characters had consistently fought to remain human despite the dehumanizing circumstances around them. The conflict with the Whisperers was more psychological than the war with the Savior. It forced the characters to confront fundamental questions about what it meant to be human and whether civilization was worth preserving. The Whisperers' ability to control vast herds of walkers made them a uniquely dangerous enemy, but their rejection of human connection also made them ultimately self-defeating. As we reach the end of this journey through Alexandria and beyond, we find ourselves contemplating the nature of hope and its burdens. The survivors who found sanctuary behind Alexandria's walls discovered that safety brought its own challenges: the responsibility to maintain what they had built, the weight of protecting others, and the constant threat of losing everything they had worked to create. The characters we followed through these trials learned that survival was only the beginning. The harder task was building something worth surviving for, creating communities that could nurture growth and meaning, rather than simply preventing death. Their struggles with leadership, justice, and community building reflected the eternal human challenge of living together in peace and prosperity. The enemies they faced, the wolves, the saviors, the Whisperers, and the Commonwealth, each represented different philosophical approaches to post-apocalyptic existence. These conflicts weren't just about resources or territory. They were about fundamental questions of human nature, social organization, and the possibility of redemption. Perhaps most importantly, these stories reminded us that the greatest threats often come not from external enemies, but from the darkness within ourselves. The characters' struggles with trauma, loss, and moral compromise revealed the psychological price of survival and the difficulty of maintaining humanity in inhuman circumstances. As we prepare to rest, we carry with us these stories of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of human connection. The walkers may have been the catalyst for change, but the real story was always about the living, about their capacity to build, to love, and to hope, despite overwhelming odds. In the quiet moments before sleep, we can appreciate the careful exploration of community, leadership, and moral complexity that made these stories resonate. The recognition that civilization is not a destination, but a continuous process of creation and renewal, speaks to something fundamental about the human experience. The journey continues, even in sleep, as we carry these stories of courage and community into our dream. Rest well, knowing that somewhere in the space between waking and sleeping, these characters continue their eternal struggle to build something lasting in a world that seems determined to tear it down. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also new opportunities to choose hope over despair, connection over isolation, and love over fear.